Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smoke. We are your podcast hosts. I'm Adamo.
And I'm Boris. And today we have a special guest here with us, Roger Takahashi. Roger graduated from the University of Waterloo with 2 degrees, one in honors kinesiology. He's also a certified strength and conditioning specialist and a registered kinesiologist. For almost 20 years, he served as the director of strength and conditioning and head strength and conditioning coach for the NHL's Vancouver Canucks, winning the President's Trophy for 2 consecutive years and going to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals in 2011. He was the inaugural president of the Strength and Conditioning Association of Professional Hockey, a position he held for 10 years, and he was one of 2 NHL strength coaches who helped to draft the NHL's banned substance policy from a supplement standpoint. After the NHL, Roger has been involved with Fire Medics Fire Academy in Surrey, BC. He started lecturing and testing there with Class 9 in 2022. He covers topics such as hydration, breathing techniques, training strategies, wellness, VO2 testing, training for firefighter physical abilities tests, and injury prevention. Welcome, Roger.
Yeah, great to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
That is quite the resume you got there.
Yeah.
Holy smokes, dude.
Hey, I'm old. The older you are, the more stuff you get. Yeah.
I need to have a drink after that spiel.
Yeah. You're probably overqualified for this podcast.
Oh, come on now. Don't say that. Don't say that.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is great. This is fantastic.
So what made you get into this line of work, this whole strength and conditioning, kinesiology? What led you down that road?
Yeah, I was always interested in, the physical aspect of sports. Like, obviously, I'm a small guy and I'm shrinking even more now as I grow older. But, I wasn't the most talented guy playing any sports, and obviously I was small and I had to work a lot harder and I had to bring something else to the table. And training was one of the ways that I could at least be a little bit more competitive, right? So that was one of the first things. And from that, playing sports growing up and then getting into university, I started with a biology degree and graduated in that, but guys across the hall in my dorm were in kinesiology and they were always doing something fun. And I'm just like, man, I'd like to do that. So they ended up, like, after I graduated, I transferred right into kinesiology and took that. And that's the stuff I was really interested in: exercise physiology, biochemistry, nutrition, training, stuff like that. And it was awesome. And, I'm kind of a closet meathead growing up too, right? So, I kind of fit in with my workouts and trying to make myself better.
Totally.
Nice.
When you went and did your schooling, was there anything that changed for you when it came to like your personal workouts? Because like you said, you were kind of a bit of a meathead, so I'm assuming it was like that bodybuilder style of working out, right? And I'm sure, obviously, this phrase of all show, no go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I always found, though, that, being a small guy, I would never be able to be the biggest guy in the gym, but I could strive to be like pound for pound the strongest guy, right? So that's what I always focused on, was strength,
right?
Trying to be able to lift a lot in good form in my size, right? So that's what I really went over for. But yeah, I'm 57 now, and I always look at when I was 20, you could get away with, eating a pizza and waking up at noon and rolling in cold and getting underneath a bar with, 200 kilos on it and just go.
Yeah.
Whereas now I can't do those things. And the other thing is too, like, the ego lifting and the bro style workouts that we used to do, it's just like nobody cares how much you can bench. Like, nobody asks you on the street those questions, right? So
actually, we had a guy apply with his resume. He had how much he could bench. It didn't go well for him, but some people do think it's important still.
And it might be a little bit different maybe if you're a power lifter, you're like a competitive, you're in the BCs and stuff, and you're actually doing that. But like as a regular guy, that kind of thing became less important to me. And as I get older, like I'm looking at guys my age, and I'm setting up for the long haul. What are the next 20-30 years going to look like for me? And I really get a little bit more functional, a little bit more injury prevention, a little bit more longevity. Like I'm working more with my VO2 and things like that. Like when I was 20, I didn't go for a run. Who cares? Like I could run if you wanted me to. I didn't have to practice it, right? So
Right. So you're 57?
I am 57.
Man, you look younger than me.
He definitely does.
He definitely does.
I didn't want to say anything first.
I was going to say, I want to look like you when I grow up, but I already look older than you, so I'm kind of hooped there.
Yeah. Next lifetime.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then how did you get involved with the NHL, right? Like obviously you did your degrees and all that kind of stuff. So can you kind of talk us through like what that next step looked like for you with getting that involvement within the NHL?
Yeah, so I was, at the time, I was doing some personal training. I was training athletes as well. I was overseeing like 5 physio clinics, so I had the rehab background. And my wife, she was like, "Hey, you want to train hockey? Like, why don't you go into hockey? And you're always talking about this." And I was like, "Oh, you gotta wait till somebody dies. Like those guys, they get their jobs and they stay there for life. Like they're not leaving."
Yeah.
Like she's like, "Just apply." So I applied for a junior team, like a junior A team that was local, the Langley Hornets at the time. And I put together a proposal, and Gary Berman, the owner, and Rick Lance was the coach at the time, and they looked at it and they're like, "This is perfect. Like we need a guy like this." So I went in there and it was awesome. Like junior A hockey, like even though I spent almost 20 years in the NHL, like the junior A hockey was such a blast. Like we did everything. We went on every road trip, slept in the aisle in the bus, and did all sorts of stuff, because there's only myself and Pauling, the equipment/medical guy, and we did like everything, and it was an unbelievable experience. And then Dr. Ted Rhodes was the exercise physiologist for the Canucks at the time, and he did all the testing. And when Pete Twist, I think he left at the end of February or something like that, anyways, they were looking for a guy, and so he asked one of our assistant coaches, Colin Crittman, he said, "Oh, you should apply." And Kritz is like, "I'm a coach. Like, I don't know anything about exercise, right?" But he goes, "We got a guy who would be really good." So put my name forward and entered the process to, the interview process. And like, I don't know how off track you guys want to go, but I got asked
we go off track all the time.
Yeah,
keep it rolling.
This is good.
You're right at home here.
Nothing to do with firefighting, just to do with hockey now. Welcome to the Behind the Ice podcast. Yeah, so I get this call and from the Canucks, and they're like, "Hey, come on in for an interview." And I was like, "Oh, this is great." I come in and it's this big boardroom, and it has like everybody, like at the time it was Brian Burke, right? Berkey's there, and he's in a sweatshirt, he's got a cup of chew, and it was just crazy. Like the coaches, the assistant coaches, like Mark Crawford, the trainers, Mike Bernstein, like everybody was there.
Wow.
And they're just firing questions at you. Like I have no idea. Like they're just asking questions, I'm answering. And I left, and there's another guy that I knew at the time who was involved in the interview process too. I think there's like 5 or 6 of us. And after he was like, "Oh man, how was it?" And I'm like, I have no idea how I did. And then he goes like, "I got crushed." He goes like, "They were asking questions about hockey, like culture and stuff I didn't know." And that was like the biggest thing, right? Like you can have all the education, but you need that practical experience. And I had spent that year in junior A where I had done everything. I'd been around hockey guys. I knew the culture. I knew what to say, what not to say, where to be, where not to stand, where like all that stuff was like invaluable. So, and those are the questions they were asking. At the end, like I didn't hear back from him for like 2 months. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess that's that, right?" And then I get this call from them. They're like, "Oh, okay, Mark Crawford wants to have lunch with you, but don't dress up. It's just casual." I'm like, "Oh, okay," like kind of dressed up, right?
Yeah.
What you got to do? You're not going to go in hoodie or something. So I showed up, and he's like, "Okay, we're going for lunch. Come here. Let's go." I got like 15 minutes or whatever. So we walked down, we had our first meet, he offered me the job, and we were eating at Quiznos.
Oh, nice.
Here I am, I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, where are we going? Like, we're going to go somewhere fancy? Like, let's say NHL, man." He's like, "Okay, let's Quiznos. What do you want? You want to tell you like 12-inch? Like, what do you want?"
Tight budget that year.
Holy cow, yeah. So and that's where I got the job, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's what it was, yeah. It was awesome.
That's a great point about the culture, because we have a lot of applicants going through the fire process, and they struggle with the culture aspect. They can do all the physical stuff and training, but when it comes to the ride-alongs or being part of that culture, that's where they kind of buckle. So
huge.
Culture is a very important part of the fire service, as it is with any sports team, really, right?
Yeah.
Understanding that culture goes a long way, right?
Yeah.
What's the difference between just regular bodybuilding as opposed to like strength and conditioning?
Well, I mean, regular bodybuilding is sort of a facet, I guess, technically, of strength and conditioning. When you really think about strength and conditioning, you think about all aspects of it, right? You know, the conditioning side where you're looking at aerobic and anaerobic metabolic fitness, and you look at strength, you look at power, you look at, you know, generating force and agility, and there's so many other components to it, right? And that's really what encompasses it. When we think of bodybuilding, we think of the typical kind of bro splits, you know, chest, back, arm, shoulders, legs, and another. You're
That's what I do.
Just did that yesterday.
Yeah. Now you're talking my language. I like the cut of your jib. Yeah, I mean, it is a facet of it, but again, like time and place, right, for everything.
Totally.
And I don't want to crap on any kind of training, to be honest. Like, everything has its worth, right? And sometimes it works for you, but, you know, like I said, as I get older and I'm seeing, you know, I've seen guys in the gym working the same way since they're 15 years old, and they're 45 now, and they're wondering why. Like, first of all, they're starting to hurt, but also they're not making any gains.
Yeah.
Right. They're just not. And other things become more important to you. So, you know, take a point. I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was unloading a truck with his son, who's like 14. And his son's grabbing boxes, just hopping off the back end. And then he's like, man, I'd never do that. And then he thought to himself, like, when did I stop doing that? Like, at what point did I think that wasn't a good idea? And he couldn't pinpoint. Like, it's not one incident, just kind of gradually just
slowly over time, kind of, right?
You know, and that's the same thing with training. Like, you can train the same way to an extent, but you got to add other stuff in, like, as you go. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like when it comes to firefighting too, having that functional fitness is going to basically create longevity for you throughout your career, right?
100%.
And this is something that I don't think a lot of people realize, is that, yeah, you can go to the gym and work out like crazy, right? And do that bro split, like you were saying, right? But that functional aspect of it is huge, because in firefighting, we're in very awkward positions. We're, you know, like, that's awesome. You can deadlift 300 pounds with a bar, but what about like picking somebody up over like a toilet or out of a bathtub or that kind of stuff, right? And it's easy to get injured when doing those types of movements, right?
Or pulling ceiling or...
Yep. And tack on to that, like, you know, you're tired and this is like the fourth call in a row and you're in gear and you have heat and your mind is going and something goes sideways. And so it's a lot different than going in the gym and trap bar deadlifting like 200 kilos, then sitting down looking at Instagram for a couple minutes, then, you know, cute girl walks by, you throw a little extra weight on, you're like, like, you know what I like, there's a nuance to it, right? To train, right? And I always say this, like, if you were training to play hockey, you know, you're going to go play hockey, would you train the same way? And the guys would be like, no, I would do that. I'd start skating and I'd start doing this. And like, you're going into the fire service, train for it.
Exactly.
Right? You know, I mean, these are the items you're going to do. So train for them, right? It's different.
Like, on that topic, like, what kind of like workouts or training regimens do you think are the most beneficial for people who are either trying to become firefighters to pass the physical test, or for people who are already firefighters and they want to have that functional fitness level?
Yeah, like, people who are trying to enter the fire service, it's a real mixed bag, because there's such a variety of where they start. There are some people that, you know, I mean, just putting on their gear, their heart rate jacks right up, you know, and it's sort of like, okay, well, you're at a different point to, you know, you get other people that have been working out for a long time and they're, you know, they're mountain climbers and they bike and they, you know, they CrossFit and whatever else, and they're in wicked shape, right? And so that's a real mixed bag, that one. But, you know, the long and short of it is there are commonalities to the occupation that need to be hit. And that's why there is like a physical abilities test in every single municipality. Even if you went to Dallas, Texas, there's one, San Jose, there's one, Calgary, there's one, you know, Surrey, there's one. And if you go online, they're very similar in the job, you know, in what they have to do: lift, push, pull, carry, climb, you know, all of this kind of stuff they have to do, but it's at pace. You know, it's very rare that you're going to be, like you said, okay, lift this 200 kilo, you know, block once and then drop it. Yeah. You know, it's going to be like, pull this ceiling, go up and down this ladder, drag this hose, like, you know, crawl around, like run out, you know, change your tank, and then have somebody yelling at you because they're freaking out. And, you know, you got crowd control and you got all sorts of other things going on. And not to mention it's 4 a.m. and you just had 20 minutes of sleep.
Yeah.
We should add that to every physical. Like even with our city's physical, we should just have, it's not at 9 a.m. It should be at 4 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
And we get to scream at you.
Yeah.
Make it more realistic.
Yeah. Right.
Well, and like that's like you were saying there, like it's kind of one thing after another, right? And your cardio has to be up. So you have to be able to like, be strong, but you also have to have a tremendous amount of cardio.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think a lot of people are aware of when it comes to the fire service, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, especially new applicants, are so focused on just being like buff and strong.
Yeah.
And then it comes to their like fitness test, and then they're gassed and they're like, holy crap, like, what do you mean I have to do a beep test? Or, you know, what do you mean this is like a circuit? Like,
I think it's also like what you see on TV. You see somebody like knocking down a door, which is 5 seconds.
Yeah.
But you don't see them loading hose for half an hour back onto the truck afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So,
and going somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like that's the big thing, right? Like, you know, I mean, and so I think like for people who have actually, you know, are in the fire service, then you're looking at a number of different things, right? Like you have to customize your workout to the amount of rest you're getting, the amount of nutrition, the hydration, like the stress, like how are you de-stressing? How are you down regulating yourself? And then how are you preparing? How much time do you have to work out, you know, work your schedule around it? And, you know, how are you make your schedule and the things you do so that you can be successful at it, right? Like don't go, okay, well, I need to get my VO2 up and I need to run. You know, like one of the most efficient ways to increase VO2 is kind of this Norwegian method, which you've probably seen, which is 4 minutes on at kind of 85% or something, like fairly rigorous, you know, not like 100%, but very high, and then going 4 minutes of low and then 4 minutes high, and then repeating that, you know, 4 to 6 times in a row, right? Well, it's not really pleasant for most people to operate at a very high, like 4 minutes on a assault bike or something like that. And so the chances of you doing it are probably pretty slim.
Right.
But would it be okay if you did a little bit of your strength work, which is kind of your bro stuff, but a little bit of, you know, heavy, you know, work? So maybe a front squat with a box jump and some kind of press or a push, you know, doing 3 or 4 sets of that after your mobility work. And then at the end, doing a finisher of like 4 rounds or 5 rounds of fire specific metabolic work, like, you know, a sandbag on your shoulder, like a half Turkish get up, getting it up off the floor, running with it, running back, getting back down on the floor, doing a bear crawl with dumbbells in your hands, like, you know, as you're pulling forward, and then, you know, all of this kind of stuff, that would be, you know, that's your finisher, right? And so you got your metabolic, you got something very functional, you got a little bit of your strength work, which you wanted in the beginning anyway, but not enough that's going to hinder you from your recovery.
Yeah. I found when I was kickboxing a lot, it was kind of that, like how you're explaining, it's like, you know, 3 minutes on, 1 minute of rest. I found my cardio went through the roof.
Yeah.
Like my cardio was so good. I could run nonstop, right? But I think a lot of people maybe find running or cardio in general to be kind of boring, right? Something like that. It was fun. It was exciting, right? But what you're talking about is you're kind of creating a bit of a system where you're getting that cardio in, but you're also getting the rest of that, you know, metabolic kind of conditioning in as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And this is the thing, there's components to every sport or every occupation, right? So yeah, VO2 has to be high, but at the same time, you have to be able to utilize that, right? So if you're pulling a ceiling, you know, obviously cardio is going to be at a premium, but also like your shoulders, like the way you're using that, like, you know, you'd have a guy with a 55 VO2 and he's weak upper body, and you get him pulling a ceiling, it'll last like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the lactate will just be through the roof and he won't be able to do it. So, yeah. So there is nuances to everything for sure.
I know some departments do a VO2 max test. How is that measured?
So you can do it a number of different ways. Like the lab way is to, you know, get a bike or a treadmill, you get a metabolic cart, you bring it in the night before, you acclimatize it to the, you know, the pressure and the temperature and so on of the room, and then you open it up, and then you hook a Rudolph valve to the mouth or a mask or something like that, and it measures gas exchange, right? So you can do that. It can be, fairly time consuming, right? Because you're going to maximum. So you're increasing your load every minute, right? And just keep going until you drop, essentially, or just can't. Well, it's not until you drop, until you can't push at that rate anymore, right?
Right.
So some of these will last 6 minutes. Some of them will last 12, 13, 14 minutes, right? Depending upon the person and the load and stuff like that. And what you're measuring is you're measuring that gas exchange. So you're measuring the body's ability to utilize oxygen. And when your activity level goes up, obviously your need for oxygen goes up to produce energy for the body, right? So we're sitting here, we're not really, well, I don't know about you guys, but we shouldn't be really using a lot of energy sitting here, right? So
Right.
Oxygen.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Yeah. I'm just hanging on here, man.
Adam was sweating just sitting there.
Yeah, but we're not breathing heavy. We're not. Our requirement for oxygen isn't high, right? But if we stood up and started marching on the spot, it'd go up, and we'd have to breathe a little heavier, and start jogging on the spot, it'd go up again, and throw a weight vest on you, to go, and so on. So as that demand for work goes up, our oxygen consumption needs to match it to an extent, right? And so that's what happens. Like the VO2 max is the most efficient way that we can utilize the oxygen for work, right? So people who have a high, 60 mils of O2 per kilogram body weight per minute, like they're in the upper echelon, and people who are 20 or something like that, they're really compromised. Yeah.
Right.
And you'll find people who have a low VO2, not only are they compromised for, aerobic work capacity, right? Like walking up a set of stairs and down, but repeating that a lot, or repeating it and then doing it again next day and the next day and the next day and so on, right? And doing it for months. That's where they're going to also kind of fall down. And obviously there's been a lot of research on longevity with VO2, and that's one of the highest sort of correlated scores to longevity. People who have high VO2s, they live for a long period of time. So
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I remember for one of the departments I was applying for, we had to do a VO2 max test, and that mask and that tube that they put in your mouth is so uncomfortable. I remember it was basically just like a fast-paced walk on a treadmill, and they would incline it every 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. And I remember just drooling. Because you can't swallow or anything. I'm just drooling all over my shirt. I'm I look like an idiot.
Yeah. And now the masks are way better, and they have different systems, more portable systems and stuff. Yeah. The Rudolph valve, it's like a snorkel almost.
Exactly.
Yeah, the tubes would fill with saliva, and people would dry out, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
It was absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it was pretty uncomfortable, I'm not gonna lie.
You find that VO2 max test is good for the fire service? It's one of the best indicators of how somebody will do.
I think it's a factor, right? Like each one of these things are little snippets of a piece of the puzzle. I don't think there's one necessarily number one test, but you need a multitude of things, right? And it gets back to sort of, the guy with the high VO2, but he hasn't got any, upper body endurance, right? Or something like that. So that there are other pieces to the puzzle for sure. But I think if you have a poor VO2, you're definitely fighting an uphill battle. There's no doubt. Absolutely no doubt.
As far as supplements and that kind of stuff go, I know that there's a lot of, people swear by certain supplements like BCAAs and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Is there any that you recommend for people to actually help them with their workouts and with their training?
So, I think supplements themselves are exactly what they are. They're a supplement to whatever nutrition that you're currently doing, right? And sometimes it's tough, I think, in the fire service because of the sporadic nature of nutrition and sleep and these things. So sometimes you're going to need a little extra of something to help you because you can't eat, you don't have the time to eat or something like that. But for most people, supplements are supplementing what they're doing. So the first step is, I would always recommend, is document your food for 2-3 days. When you eat it, how much you eat, what you're eating, and then see a dietitian, a registered dietitian or something like that, and then see where your holes are. That's number one before you start throwing stuff, right? It would be like me saying, hey, there's a whole bunch of medicine in this cabinet here, take stuff.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, well, I don't have diabetes. Well, take this insulin anyway.
Right.
You'd be like, what? Oh, it helped my buddy.
Yeah.
But he's diabetic.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And that's the thing, people start taking stuff because of their buddies or because of the advertising or something like that. And they don't really look behind it.
Yeah.
And so look at your nutrition first. And there's a lot of good registered dietitians that work with first responders and understand their schedule and the stress that they're under. And, you know, and okay, this is what you can do. These are meals you can take. This will help you. You know, and everybody's different with their nutrition. Like we're genetically, we're different. Like, look at us here. Like we're all different. We're different heights, weights. Like we metabolize differently. Like we should be eating different things, right?
Right.
So I think that's the first step before starting to supplement is that. The second step, you know, you asked me like, okay, what kind of supplements would be good? One of the most researched supplements obviously is creatine, right? So all the research into creatine is really moving more now into sort of brain health, right? Dementia, Alzheimer's, concussions, and things like that. And there's been, you know, a lot of benefit to taking sort of a 5-gram dosage of creatine daily, right? Not for muscle growth or any other reason, but for brain health. So I think going down that route, I think is important. I would probably, you know, look at something like that for people.
Interesting.
I'm glad you said that because I started taking creatine about 2 months ago. And like I take like a 5-gram scoop every day. And I've actually noticed just even like my energy levels and stuff like that have gotten a lot better because it is tough with the shift work, right? Like we're, you know, it's the sleep deprivation, it's the times that we're eating, it's what we're eating, it's, you know, the stressors that our bodies and our minds are going through while we're on the job, right? So I'm glad that you touched on that because I think that's another thing that people might not be aware of is, you know, you're not eating at regular times or you're not eating regular meals. You're coming off of shift sometimes and you're going to sleep right when you get home and waking up at 2 p.m., right? Do you have any recommendations for how people can still, you know, be sleep deprived and all that kind of stuff and be sleeping in or whatever it is after a shift and still maintain like a good nutritional regimen in their life?
Yeah, like I think, you know, you look at hydration, I you know, the people at Firemedics will laugh at me now because I always say the same thing to them. I always say front end load your hydration, right? Like soon as you get up, before you go to the bathroom, before you brush your teeth, like you should have a water bottle next to you and drink the whole thing, drain it all before you go do anything else, right? Because when you sleep, you're already probably running a little bit of water debt or dehydration, and then you sweat at night and all this, and now you're behind the 8 ball, right? So get after it right away, right? And plus, you know, you don't want to drink like, you know, 2 liters before you go to bed because now you got to get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, right? So, you know, front end load it a little bit like that, you know, pre-make your meals is always a good thing, right? You know, snacks are key because you're probably not going to sit down to like a five course meal, right? You sit down to like a couple of things you can shove in your mouth, and you know, so you want to get the most bang for your buck out of those things, right? Like, you know, complex carbs with some protein, et cetera, like, you know, you can make, there's so many recipes now. It's not like 30 years ago where you had to kind of experiment on your own. You got YouTube, you got Instagram, Pinterest, whatever. You can look up like protein bars and stuff, make your own, and stuff like that. I think is really helpful because if it's there, then accessibility, then you'll use it, right? If it's not, then you either, most people just won't eat, or they'll eat garbage, right? So
do you know, like, is there any benefits to fasting?
So
this is a bit of a controversial one, isn't it?
Yeah, like a lot of the research done on, like, and of course, you know, you're going to get a lot of people who I think it's very polarizing. Any type of nutrition dogma that you follow is going to have its followers and its detractors, right? So you know, paleo, you know, vegan, you know, keto, whatever, they will have, like, you know, I did great success on this and so on. So, you know, it may work for some people. I don't think the research, I mean, it works for a lot of affected populations too. Like, they've done a lot of different things. Some of the research is done on, like, obviously animals and things like that, which don't have the same structure. But, you know, I think for some people, it's a way that they can monitor their like, they can restrict their calories, right? So they can easily say, I can only eat from, you know, this time to this time, provided that they don't fill the rest of the time with, like, you know, junk, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Because some people see it as carte blanche to, like, perfect, like, you know, Whopper Wednesday, and then I'm going to go and have a bag of chips and whatever, 3 sodas, and, you know, so you can't really do that. Like, you have to marry it with some other good habits, I think. If I were a firefighter on shift, I don't think I would do it because you would run out of gas. It would be dangerous, I think. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One good thing in this kind of new era of firefighters is we definitely try to eat healthier.
Yeah.
Right. You know, if you look at pictures from 25 years ago, there was a lot of overweight firefighters who were extremely unhealthy, didn't take care of themselves. And that's shifted now to there's more awareness of what the job does to us physically and mentally.
Yeah.
And there's, some things we can't control. We can't control that there's a fire at 3:00 in the morning that we got to go to, right?
Yeah.
But we can control what we eat and what we put in our bodies and how we train and stuff like that, right? So it's definitely gotten a lot better. I know a big thing is like bootables, right? Like rice, tons of veggies, chicken, right? But there is this new era of firefighter that we're really a lot more conscious of what we're putting into our body, and we're trying to be healthy, right? Our goal is to basically bleed the pension dry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Whereas, back in the day, it was like people would retire at 55 and die at 60.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot of smoking and drinking probably had an effect on that as well. And like you're saying, we're a lot more conscious about those things. And
yeah. And honestly, I think, I think it's happening worldwide, right? Like you look at, I look at hockey because that's my background, and, you take a look at the 70s, what were they doing? They're drinking beer and having a couple darts, right?
Yeah.
And this is what they're doing. And I tell this story all the time, but my first year, which was 2003, I remember going out into the hallway in between periods, and I could smell cigarettes, and I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, who's smoking? Like, there's a couple of European guys down in the loading bay from the other team having a couple darts, talking to each other, and then they put them out and they went back in the dressing room.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that was like 2003, right? So
not that long ago.
Yeah, not that long ago. I mean, it that was the only time it happened, but this is strange, right?
Yeah. I think there's just so much more awareness now of just health in general, right? And people are a lot more health conscious. That being said, I mean, there's still a lot of unhealthy things that happen, right? I'm sure there's a lot of firefighters that probably drink too much outside of the job and, that kind of stuff, right? But I think the overall is starting to get better.
Yeah, and I think, with social awareness, like, you look at TikTok and you look like Instagram and all these things, and what are the firefighters doing? They're like, doing physical stuff, right? Running up and down. And it's not, I think that is going to, let people know that, this is what the expectation is. This is where the bar is. This is what, so hopefully it's attracting people who like to do that, and want to be in that condition. Although I think, it always does surprise me, when I run across, people that are thinking of getting into the fire service, and I'm like, whoa, you haven't done any work.
Yeah. Fitness is one of the things we harp on the most, I think, on this podcast too, because it just takes so much more time than, buffing up your resume to be ready for the job. So
like we've said in a previous episode, like fitness isn't like a course that you can take over a weekend and put it on your resume, right? It takes time to get fit and to like build up your stamina and to build up your strength and that kind of stuff, right? So like people who are looking to get into the fire service, that should be like your number one thing that you should be starting with is getting yourself fit, getting yourself in shape for what you're about to do, right? And I'm sure, you see it often, right? Especially with fire medics, you have certain recruits come in and they're just like blown away by how physical this job is, right?
The thing is, when you look at a physical abilities test, they're all available to you online. Like I was just telling the last class, I said, you have all the answers to your quiz. Like, they're right here.
Right.
You got to like put this on your shoulder. It weighs this much. You're going to be wearing this. You need to get this done in this long.
Yeah.
Like, that's your cutoff. Like, you have all the answers. Like, so it reminds me a lot of the entry draft combine for the NHL, where they invite all the top skaters over to Buffalo and they put them through this old combine, which involves, VO2, wind gauge, all this kind of stuff, right? And my thought process to that is held all the time, every single year, annually, the same time, same place, same tests, all the time. If you're one of the top 100 skaters, you're probably going to get invited. So if you show up and you're out of shape, that says more to me than anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it means you had all the time to do it and something's not right.
Yeah. Yours to lose kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so it's the same thing. Like I said to a lot of these guys, like, you don't really know, sometimes some of the questions or the angle that might be in an interview, or you might get nerves or something, but like, this is something you can work on right now. Get after it. Like, it's crazy.
It's 100% your responsibility. Like you said,
Yeah.
in an interview,
Yeah.
they might throw a question at you that you weren't expecting, or
Yeah.
it can go sideways from somebody else's point of view, but
Yeah.
fitness is all you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And also like with the fitness standards and the fitness tests that fire departments do, like it's kind of a bare minimum.
Yeah. 100%.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like I would say that they're actually relatively easy compared to actually going out and fighting a fire and loading hose and breaching doors and all that kind of stuff is a lot tougher than just the basic fitness tests that most departments put on, right? And in a way, I think that they should be harder, the fitness tests, because I think it's a bit of a dose of reality as to what you're getting into.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I agree. And throw in heat.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about heat.
No.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. I think, obviously they don't want to, kill anybody or injure anybody, but they should be a little bit tougher. I agree. Yeah.
On that topic of heat too, like the obvious thing is heat's gonna dehydrate you probably quicker, right?
Yeah.
But what are some other like concerns around being in that heated environment and working as hard as you are?
The work capacity drops.
Yeah.
Right. Like force drops. The capacity to do work for an extended period of time at a high rate drops off. Right. Like all of these things, recovery in between bouts of high workload drop off, right? You can't recover as quickly, right? Like those are all factors that make, like you said, like a fairly easy task really, really, really difficult.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
And not to mention, like, obviously once you get tired, your mind starts going, right? You can't focus and you do things wrong, or you forget things, or you do something you definitely would never do if you weren't tired.
Yeah.
Right? And that can get really, really dangerous. So, yeah.
Do you think there's benefits to sauna use when it comes to like heat acclimation?
Yeah, for some people, definitely there is. I think like anything else, you have to get gradual at it and build it up over time, right? And obviously keep an eye on your hydration. So, but there are some people that really do go to that. So I was just looking at this the other day. There's a little gadget that you can buy. It's a little patch that goes on you that's got an AI algorithm within it, and it measures like core temperature, like without actually,
like a nicotine patch type of thing?
Yeah, type idea. Yeah. Yeah. And so it measures your core temperature by doing that, and it's supposed to be quite accurate. But there's some, sort of accolades from like these endurance runners on there and stuff like this that said, hey, I looked at this and then I started heat training so I could, because my race was in, whatever, Death Valley or wherever the heck it was. And, and they acclimatized to it by doing this and using this patch to figure out sort of where they were and what work capacity they could do at certain temperatures, right? So,
right.
Wow.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So,
do you find that technology is advanced over the years quite a bit to help us a lot more these days in getting that higher physical fitness level?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like undoubtedly, like, I look at, when I started in 2003, we always used to joke like bikes and barbells, like that's what I was, right? Like that was it. And then, it got into nutrition and supplements and, sleep bands and heart rate monitors and GPS monitors and workload and all sorts of stuff, right? And it just kind of blew out from there. But now all of that stuff is accessible to everybody. Like, you're wearing some kind of wearable, you got your smartwatch on, you can do pretty much everything. Although with a word of caution, right? You need to make sure that that's accurate under the same circumstances and how you need to interpret the data that comes off of it, right?
Right.
So a lot of times people will be like, holy cow, my HRV is like super low. So, all of a sudden, like I remember when we first were doing some monitoring of readiness at the time, your parasympathetic nervous system, and players would get these scores and they'd be like, oh my goodness, like I'm in the yellow, I'm 30, so I'm going to have a terrible game tonight. It's like, no. This shows you that, these are certain things we need to do to make sure you're ready by 7 o'clock.
Right.
We're going to change your warm-up style. We're going to maybe change your nap around. We're going to change like the way you hydrate or whatever, or keep it the same to this point or whatever, right? So it gives you a point of, it opens the door to conversation as to why, right?
Yeah.
And that's
absolutely.
what it is. But unfortunately, like people look at the wearables and they just kind of go off on one tangent because they only look at the first layer. So
right.
Yeah.
Speaking of warm-ups, so I know with my crew we try and do like a cardio circuit in the morning, mix it with some like some calisthenics and stuff like that, and it's a really good way that we've found to like just start the day, because one, I mean, you feel like you've accomplished something right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
Two, if the day gets crazy busy, you've at least got a bit of a workout in. And also just cognitively, like you just feel so much more alert, and you just feel more like you're there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you recommend any certain warm-ups that members should be doing at the start of shift?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea to do that. And I always tell this story about Alain Vignon, one of the coaches, and he would always have the players come into the dressing room at like kind of 9:30 in the morning. And he said, okay, you, meaning me, run them through a 5-minute stretch. And I'm like, okay, from a strength and conditioning point, like a 5-minute static stretch is pretty much useless. It's not going to have any trade-off onto performance or nothing really.
Right.
And he's like, I don't care, just do it.
Yeah.
His argument is, I'm the strength coach, he would always say, but amongst other things. But we would have everybody in there doing this little stretch, and then they would do it, and then they'd go on, get their gear on or whatever and go on the ice. And, we kept doing this, and I'm like, what are we doing? Right. Mm-hmm. But his thought process was like, I want everybody there in one spot thinking about going out and practicing. I don't want a guy taping his wrist, another guy heating his skates, somebody else having a coffee, somebody in the gym rolling out. Like, I want everybody there, for 5 minutes, and we're all together, we're all chatting, like it's all like we're going out together. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of benefit from that. And sometimes as strength coaches, like we always look at, just from a strength and conditioning standpoint, but it's really that mental, aspect of readiness. Like that's another facet of readiness, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really good that, you get everybody together, you run through something, it amps you up, it gets you ready, and away you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah.
On the topic of just warming up, what do you do in particular, like say for your workouts? Like what does your warm up look like? Right? Because, I honestly think like, before jiu-jitsu, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to stretch, and then, we have a jiu-jitsu coach who puts us through these animal warm-ups. It's like the duck walk, the bear crawl, and then every time I'm like, oh God, I hate doing this. But I also feel like after we do that, I got a good sweat on and I perform better.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think for me, like I always look at the warm-up matches what I'm going to do that day. So if I'm going to do a lot of running and a lot of sprinting or something like that, I do a lot of hopping, a lot of Achilles work, a lot of, stuff like that, right? If it involves a lot of like squatting or something like that, then I'm going to do a lot of like, hip movement, knee movement, posterior chain for trap barring and stuff. So whatever I do prior is going to match my activity. And I'm like everybody else, like, at the end of the day, like nobody wants to spend 45 minutes warming up and 5 minutes lifting. You want to do it the other way around. So my warm-ups are quite short, like they're like 10 minutes, right? Like they're very directed, and, go right through it and then get onto it. And usually if I'm lifting, the first set is going to be lighter, and it's not until I get to my last couple of sets that are more work sets, right?
Right.
And it depends on what I'm lifting for. So as an example, like right now, I'm making sure I'm maintaining strength or building a little bit of strength. So my rep scheme is fairly low on those things, right? And then at the end, like I said, I go into this finisher of, 4 rounds or whatever of something metabolic, but very functional, right? So,
yeah. So you really work your way up to what your kind of end goal for that set's going to be.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like I said, gone are the days you just get in and roll out of bed and throw a couple 100 kilos on your back.
Yeah, for sure.
Days are long gone. Yeah. So,
I guess too, sorry, Boris, but I guess too with the warm-ups, you're also getting that mobility in, right? So you're going to be able to kind of get that deeper squat or whatever, right? Without like blowing out your back.
Yeah. And I mean, the key is you're getting sort of a gradual increase in body temperature, heart rate, blood pressure. Like it's that gradual curve that you're getting, that's warming yourself up versus, like I said, just getting in cold and bang, going out under load, right? And people can do that, but they don't get away with it for a long time.
Totally.
Yeah.
You touched on it earlier a little bit about, being young and just throwing stuff on and not worrying about the repercussions later.
Yeah.
What would be your advice to somebody who's brand new to the fire service, 25-year-old firefighter, what their workout looks like compared to a 45-year-old firefighter veteran?
Yeah, like I think the younger guys, like, the capacity to do work is fairly high, right? So they can obviously get away with, more density in their workout and more frequency in their workout and things like that. But at the same time, I think they should be focused in on some of the things that are going to creep up like 2 decades from then, right? A decade or 2 decades. Like, what are your hot spots going to be? Like your hip, your low back, your shoulder, your knee, your ankle, whatever these joints are, right? So I think you need to start throwing some of that stuff in and working through that at a young age, right? Because then when you get to be, in your 40s or late 40s, like this is what I do, right? And for the older guys, like it's a matter of, again, it gets back to that same thing of what is their workout experience? Where are they on the continuum? Like, are they guys who've worked out all their lives? Well, then that's a different story than somebody who's kind of let themselves go the past like 5, 6, 7 years and then's trying to get back into it. The workouts are totally different, right?
Right.
And it's funny, like I do train some guys who are, in their 40s and stuff, and they're like, holy crap, like I could just do mobility because that's the thing I suck at.
Yeah.
Right.
And the cardio, they suck. Right. And honestly, the strength, even though it goes down, they usually get it back very quick. But the other two things, it's an uphill battle. Right.
Just
so
trying to maintain that throughout the.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You were kind of talking about stretching earlier. Do you stretch before and after workouts, or like how important is it to get that stretch in?
Well, again, like for most people, they should do some type of a, mobility / dynamic warm up and ramping up in some more like ballistic plyo hopping like type stuff as they approach, their workout to get themselves like nervous system more amped up. And, when you're finishing, you can do some, traction work or some breathing work or something like that. And you really need to like how fast you recover is based really like how ready you are for your next workout starts at the end of this workout. So if we just finish working out now, the faster I can bring my system down to a rest is going to buy me time, right? So now instead of just finishing my workout and going, looking on Instagram and walking around, I should lie down. I should do some breath work, some meditation, like a couple minutes. That's all I need. Couple minutes, bring the heart rate down, get myself dialed in, and then go on my day, right? So like for myself personally, like when I finish, I'll do that. But then at night, like I'll spend 5-10 minutes before we go to bed and I'll stretch out. Because I know the areas that are stiff on me. I won't stretch everything, but I have specific areas that I target.
Right.
Yeah, and it actually, helps down-regulate yourself. It's kind of relaxed, and and it doesn't take long. Like literally, like 5 minutes some days.
Yeah.
Like I know the high points. I know what I have to do, and I just do those. Right. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a big production, and
Yeah.
I don't have to post it on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How long should people be holding a stretch for when they are stretching?
Well, again, this is going to open up a can of worms for debate, obviously. But like, I'm going to tell you not the specific strength and conditioning kind of, academic answer. I'm going to tell you the practical answer. The practical answer is, to work a joint through its range of motion or through whatever range of motion you want to accomplish, and use it to warm up and be functional, right? And most people I know, most guys I know, they're not going to hold up a stretch for like a minute or something. It's, like do it once. So, it's more better to like work through a range of motion, do like, I don't know, your Spider-Man reaches or whatever, pick something, right? And do a few of those, then move into like a, side lunge to curtsy lunge, and then move into, whatever, and move through these things so you keep yourself moving and getting, those joint ranges of motion. And for most guys, it's like, you're counting reps, so you're doing something, right? They're thinking this is accomplishing something instead of just holding.
Right.
And I think that's better. Yeah.
So the dynamic stretching is a lot better than just that static hold.
It depends on what you're using them for, right? And static stretching is more down regulating, right? You're holding a stretch for a lot longer. You're working on your breath, your breathing. And I always tell people, instead of holding like whatever your hamstring stretch for 30 seconds or a minute, do it for 5 breaths or something where you're breathing in for a few seconds and breathing out for a little longer, and count it that way. And that will help bring you down into that parasympathetic kind of relax kind of system versus like, just looking at your watch and going, oh, are we there yet? 30 seconds. Oh, come on, 25. Like, oh,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And it's always like, there's, when I was a younger strength coach, I would always think, well, this is the way, like the research shows this, you should do it this way, Now I'm older and I'm like, hey, just get it in, get it done. Like, this is what this person can do. This is what gravitates them to the weight room, and this is what keeps them active. And like, get it done. Like, that's what they're going to do. So let's make it work for them.
Right.
Let's put them in a chance where they can succeed versus like, okay, hold this hamstring stretch for 2 minutes. Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
With the topic of breath work, can you just kind of explain what that is and like what it does?
So, yeah, I mean, this is another rabbit hole too, because a lot of people get kind of biohacky and they go down this and there, whatever. I think it's another facet of wellness and working out. Like, this is what it is. Like, there's no one thing that is going to make you, superhuman. And, regardless of what the gurus say, it's part of, your human, physiology. So I like to use the breath work to try and down-regulate myself. And I think it's really helpful for a lot of people, just kind of that slow breathing in through your nose for like 4 seconds, breathing out through your mouth for longer, right? And it helps to relax people and focus. And I always go about like talking about, like, people always say, oh, meditation's good. Yeah. You know what meditation is? Meditation is being in the moment. So it's like focusing. And if I'm breathing in through my nose, I'm breathing in, I'm focusing on like how cold it is going through my nose, the temperature. I'm breathing in on how my belly is going out. When I breathe out, I'm focusing in on like coolness of the air, the heat coming through my mouth. I'm watching my stomach go down, like whatever, all these, that's what meditation is, right?
Right.
So that's all that I've tend to tell people is start with that, right? Then you can get into like tactical breathing, right? Which is skip breathing and all these other, box breathing, et cetera, et cetera. And that's more for like consumption drill type situations. And that's a different animal, right? And really, like, those are situations where you're going to do a workout and then you're going to try like one of those tactical breathing methods. And you're going to see if it works for you. And then you're going to try it, like you're going to next work, you're going to try another one, you're going to try another one. And there's not one that's better than the other, but there is one that's going to work for you specifically. And you two guys might be totally different. Right.
Yeah.
But it's like anything else. It's like working out, practice it when you're in the gym. Don't practice it when you're at a fire.
Right. Yeah.
Like, don't go,
exactly.
well, maybe I'll try skip breathing. My tank, this alarm's going off. Like, that's not the time to practice. The time to practice is in the gym.
Yeah.
It's just like anything else, right? Get good at it there, and then you don't have a problem later.
And that's that proactive versus reactive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's people have to get good at being uncomfortable and pushing through and figuring out sort of what is my sticking point so that I know when I get in trouble, I'm going to be beyond that. Props out to my kid. Like I'm talking, he's in the military, but what he did was, he knew what he had to do. He's going to Quebec. He would wake up at 4:30 in the morning to slip into their time zone before he went. He'd wake up 4:30, throw a 40-pound vest on, and go rucking every morning. Rain, doesn't matter.
That's good to see that they're still doing that.
Yeah.
Did he get his head shaved as well? Or?
Yeah, he did.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Still, yeah. His hairdresser cried.
Yeah.
She's like, oh my goodness. Like, yeah. But that's what he did, right? Like, this is, be uncomfortable now, right?
Yeah.
So when you go, like, and that's like, I talked to him and he's like, oh yeah, like this is so easy for me here.
Yeah, that's good.
It's like, and that's what you want to be like.
Yeah, well, because he took that time to be proactive and prepare. So that way, like you said, he's not in the moment that he's there. He's not stressing out about it because he's already worked his way up to this. So now this is easy for him. This is just another Tuesday. Yeah. Right.
And that's the thing, right? Like, the first thing you go over there and surprise, you're getting up at 6 a.m. He's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Whereas other guys are like, oh my goodness, I'm so tired.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're behind the 8 ball. You haven't even put your feet in your boots yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Fighting the battle before it even begins.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Did they shave your head, Boris?
They did. Yeah. That's what I was asking. I'm like, it's good that they still keep those things in,
I'm going to picture you with a shaved head.
It's terrible. I mean, I look bad now, and even with a shaved head, it's worse. So. But we were talking about it a little bit earlier there, Roger. You said your son's going as a welder, right, in the Navy?
Yeah.
Good choice.
He's going for,
smart.
Yeah, he is super excited. So
That's good to hear. And you coach all your kids in hockey as well?
Did, yeah. H1 all the way to U18. So yeah,
Nice.
yeah, it was great. And honestly, like, as great obviously as the NHL was, it's the past couple of years being able to be with my kids has been really something. Like the past, like I kind of miss the first two older kids, but the two younger kids, like I'm trying to spend as much time as I can with them. And I know, it's such a finite time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it just goes by so fast, and I'm trying to latch on to like every moment I can.
That's good to hear.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Down when I actually, both our wives are expecting at the roughly same time.
Congrats.
I'm glad that you clarified that, because if you were like down when I were having kids, it would have been people would have had some questions.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time.
Yeah, that sure
Very
is.
exciting
Yeah,
time.
and this is the thing, right? Like, it's there's no manual to it. There's nothing. It's just you just go with it, and everyone's experience is different, right?
Yeah.
And you guys have the sleep deprivation already going, so you're ahead of things.
Yeah, we got that one figured out.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. That actually, I have a question for you about that, actually, because there are a lot of, younger firefighters on the job who are, start families and that kind of stuff, right? And obviously huge time commitment, of course, right?
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to staying fit and stuff like that, is there ways that you can get more out of your workout in a shorter amount of time?
Well, I think like one of the things that, coming from kind of the old school bro split situation is I never used to time my rest periods.
Right.
I'd just go when I felt like I was good to go. And sometimes it'd be short and sometimes it'd be long, depending upon what I was doing. And I think if you, have your time limit, like I think that's really important, and say, okay, I'm taking 30 seconds rest or 60 or whatever, depending upon the load and what goal you're after, right?
Right.
And really kind of keep yourself to that. That really trims your workouts down. And it also gets a lot, like all of a sudden you realize, oh crap, I can't lift 100 kilos. Like with that 60-second rest period, I can only do like 80 kilos.
Yeah.
And then you're lifting a little bit more efficiently. So I think that's one of the ways.
Yeah.
And have a variety of workouts available to you, so you can say, okay, today like had a really tough like shift and man, I'm just done. Like I don't think I look on my schedule and it's got this metabolic thing that's like 6 rounds. I can't even think about like getting in the gym, and I got to do that. Like you can go kind of on demand and go, okay, today I'm going to do a mobility thing. It's going to take me 10 minutes and I got a little bit of core. It's going to take me another 5 or 10 and I'm done. Like that might be that day. Right. But everything you do like adds to a little piece of armor. Right. And so you got to just keep chipping away like that. And on days when all of a sudden, you get that break and you can go after it on those days. Right. Or do some kind of minimal amount on the other days that's going to keep your cardio and maintenance. Right. So, and also like think about getting outside and interacting with people and things like that. Like we always talk about sort of the 4 pillars of wellness, right? 1 is sleep, and 2 is exercise or activity, right? And 3 is like social well-being, is interacting, making sure like those things go well, right?
Yeah.
And then the 4th one's like kind of your nutrition aspect of it. But those are the pillars that you need to keep going. And I know with a newborn, especially like the first one, it's like life-changing, right? Also it's like, whoa, like what is happening, and how to make like a little baby that weighs like 7-8 pounds feel like a rock in your arm, right? Like it's, you're hanging on to this thing for hours. It feels like, And so you and your wife is tired and all these other things, right? And you kind of have to get a schedule down with her. I remember like our second kid, actually one that's in the Navy, he cried all the time, like screamed, like it was horrible. And like honestly, and he knows it, so I can say this, but my wife and I had this code word that it didn't matter what you're doing, we would yell switch. And if you're in the shower, you come out of the shower, you grab that kid. Yeah. Because the other person is at their wit's end. And so you have to have like these little things you can work together to make it easier for yourselves, right?
Absolutely.
And that's where, having help, if you have relatives, you have in-laws, whatever that could be, we didn't have anybody. It was just us, right? So we're on our own. But like, if you do have that, brothers, whatever, sisters, like they can help. Right?
Yeah.
And that's like never turn help down, like ever. Don't go, oh, I think we got, like, we're okay. No. Just take it, just right away.
Yeah.
There's no pride in that. Like nobody gets a prize for this, So
Absolutely.
yeah. And the other thing we were talking about the other day, I was talking about sleep with the guys, and I said, like, so one of the guys has this newborn, and he was talking about, sleeping and trying to get this kid to sleep. Say, hey, like, didn't matter what method you use, because, everyone's reading, oh, it's the co-sleeping. No, you got to leave them alone and let them cry and all this stuff, right? And no matter what method you use, I don't know of any 20-year-olds that are still co-sleeping with their parents.
Yeah, that's
you know
a good
what I mean?
point.
Whatever method you used, it worked.
Yeah.
So don't get hung up. Don't get crazy over it. Just like, kind of relax and,
Right.
Figure
Figure out what works for you.
Yeah, what works for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy though.
Yeah, for sure.
Exciting times.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting and it's nervous and, yeah. It's going to be fun though.
A lot of emotions that go into it, right? But I know for me, like, that's the one thing my wife and I talked about, right? Is like, I want her to still be able to have her time with her friends and go to yoga and the stuff that she likes to do, right?
Yeah.
And, I still want to be able to go to jiu-jitsu 3 times a week and at least get a bit of a lift in, right? So, because obviously, things are going to change quite a bit and lifestyles are going to change. But when it comes to our jobs, for me, it's just, I really need to make sure that I keep up that fitness level because, I mean, it's such an important part of our job, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So just figuring it out, I guess, right? And figure out how to time things properly and that kind of stuff, right?
Keep that consistency, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's going to be tough. Like, in the first little bit, you're going to be really tired, right? And it's just, okay, what can I get in? What can I get done, in this amount of time? And don't beat yourself up for missing it, and just, it'll happen. Like it'll even itself out.
Well,
right,
I liked what you said earlier about every little bit that you do adds to your armor, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like, you know what, I'm not going to be able to get a 1 hour workout in today, but I can do some mobility work or some calisthenics at home for 20 minutes or whatever, right? And it's you're still accomplishing something. Right.
Yeah, I used to, our first kid, I used to hang on to him, and I used to do like squats and stuff in his room while I was trying to get him to sleep, and side to side lunges with him, like a little weight, right? You're hanging on.
Bicep curls with him.
A little curl, and I used to do that because I knew that was the only time I could get my workout in.
Yeah.
Like that I was awake and I could get, 20 minutes, half an hour of whatever in, and that's what I would do.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
what's one piece of advice that you would give to aspiring firefighters when it comes to fitness?
Yeah, it's tough to give one, but I would say, like, you can always be better. Like that's the thing. And it surprises people, who do, like, we do a submax VO2 on the watt bike, at fire medics when people come in, and it always surprises them at how hard it is. They always say, like, I thought I was in better shape, man. Like, first minute was super easy. The second minute was hard. And the third minute, I could barely make it through. Like, my legs were like blowing up. And it's like, like, it doesn't matter how good shape you are. You can always be better. Like, you should always strive to be better. Like, a lot of people, watch hockey, and it's like, you go out on the ice and you look, Sidney Crosby's still hammering pucks. Connor McDavid's still skating. Like, Quinn Hughes is still shooting pucks. Like, all these guys are still working on their craft, even though technically they're the best in the world.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's the difference between probably a good firefighter and an excellent firefighter, right? Like, this same difference between a good hockey player and the best hockey player.
Right.
Right? Like, they're the guys who put in, like, they're not happy with, where they are, or they believe they can do better.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. They look at what they're weak at, and they exploit that. They look at what they're good at, and they beef that up.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you think like, oh yeah, I can bench press 200 kilos and I ran a marathon last year, I'm good.
Yeah.
Or I passed the physical, like, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. That the physical is like day one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Minimum qualification, right?
It's like the NHL, right? Congratulations, you passed day one of training camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
now comes the hard stuff.
Yeah, that's nothing, right? Like,
can you bench press 200 kilos?
no.
Okay, because you keep saying that, and I was like, if I tried that, I'd break my elbows and shit my pants. Like, there's no way in hell.
I use
I could do
that. I use that just as an example. Yeah, because a lot of guys, like, they're always talking about mention whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
If people want to reach out to you or find you, because you do have a program for first responders specifically. Actually, would you mind just talking about that a little bit, and then we can talk about where people can find you?
I have a first responder program online. That's just, you can go on to Train Heroic, and then, it's a free app, and then you just subscribe to this thing. But it started because, we were looking for something like that. And there are tons of first responder programs out there. We are revamping it right now to be a little bit more specific. One of the things that I'm running into, which is always a challenge with any kind of fitness program, is that you're getting a varying degree of people at their start point.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get some people that have, they've been working out for 20 years, and you get some people that have only just stepped foot in the gym.
Right.
So this is the issue that we're kind of running into sometimes. And I feel like, when people start that program, I should have, they should have a little bit of dialogue with me and say, look, like, I've never done anything, or, hey man, like, I'm really fit. I run this. I do this. I won the CrossFit Worlds last year.
Right.
Whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that's a different starting point, right? But we are revamping that program to be way more specific. More sandbag stuff, more dragging, more pulling, more like climbing, all that kind of stuff. So, and we started it out to be more of a bare bones type of workout where you didn't have to have a lot of equipment, right?
Right.
Because we just wanted people to get started, get going. There is no excuse for not doing anything. Like today in the, at Fire Medics, we did this little thing with a couple of bear crawls, forward and back kind of idea. And it was like 2 reps forward, 2 reps back. And we did like 3 or 4 rounds of that. And it's like, got up, it's like, hey, how many people, like, their heart rates are up? Everybody's like, yeah. It's surprising, right?
Yeah.
It shows you that you don't need to have the excuse of, I can't make it to a gym. Like, just do that.
Yeah.
Put your watch on, go 30 seconds back and forth.
Yeah.
Rest, go 30 seconds back and forth. Do 3 or 4 of those, boom, done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't like doing the same thing over again, do that. Do 1.5 like air squats, do like some push-ups, do a couple of jumps, like whatever, and then bang, done. Do 5 different exercises, keeps your brain going, and you don't have to repeat the same one and your heart rate's up. So
awesome.
Yeah. So the program itself, we're definitely redoing a lot of it. So, but yeah, that's it. That's where we're at with that. And I do have an Instagram page, but I haven't posted on it for like forever.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it's not my thing. But TAC Athletics is my company.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. And actually, I got a funny story. There's a tacathletics.org, and it's down in like New York or someplace.
Oh,
and there's
really?
a tacathletics.com, which is me. And the .org one, I had a guy call from New York, and we're talking, and I'm talking about like, what do you do, for your lifting and da-da-da. And he's like, okay, so I'll come next Wednesday. I'm like, okay, like, I'm not like in Vancouver, I'm in Langley, like it's a little ways out. Oh yeah. And he's like, Langley, he's like, where's that? Like, and I found out that he was actually in New York. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, it was actually pretty funny. He's like, why are you coming up on my feed? Like, what the heck's going on? Yeah. Yeah. So he was
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tacathletics.com is where people can find you.
TAK. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, Roger, thank you so much, man.
Yeah,
this was
anytime.
This was awesome.
Yeah.
I've learned so much, and I think a lot of our listeners, whether they're already firefighters or they're trying to become firefighters, they've all learned a lot out of this, and we really appreciate you coming out, man.
Yeah, anytime. I love this thing. Like I said, I like talking shop, so anytime you want. Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. We'll probably have you on again.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. We'll go into more detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'll bring in videos of me benching the 200 kilo.
Yeah. I want to see that.
Yeah.
I want some proof.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be
come in and there's a bench press set up.
Yeah. It's go time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right
Thanks,
on.
Roger.
Hey, everyone. We just wanted to take a moment quickly to thank our sponsors. Our first sponsor is CanCon Construction. CanCon is located in Abbotsford, BC. CanCon specializes in heavy machinery for construction sites, such as backhoes, excavators, and so on. If you're looking to gain experience, or if you already have experience as an equipment operator and you're looking for a new place to work, we highly suggest CanCon Construction. They're one of the best in the business, and they treat their employees like gold. So check them out. You can look at their website at canconconstruction.com. The next sponsor we'd like to thank is Strike Recovery and Performance. Strike is located in Burnaby, BC. They provide physio, chiropractor, and RMTs. I've been personally going to Strike for a few years now, so it's really awesome that they've decided to sponsor our podcast. I've gone to other chiros and physios before, and nothing compares to Strike. Their head chiropractor was actually a chiropractor for the UFC for quite a while, so they have a lot of experience dealing with professional athletes. And as firefighters, you have the potential of getting injured, and they're the people to go see. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and if you liked what you heard, just like and subscribe, follow us on Instagram, and like Roger said, tacathletics.com is where you can find him and reach out. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.